Hello, and my name is Pete Rushmer, and I'm your host today of A Half Dozen Things podcast. A Half Dozen Things is a podcast for business owners just like you. Whether you're an underdog hungry for success, or you're already smashing it but want to continue to level up, we are here each week for you to get insight and learning from the very best in the business. No fluff, no BS, and no self-proclaimed gurus talking about how easy business or life is.
Okay, you've started recording. Red light's rolling. I've got a thumbs up. I'm joined today by Peter Kelly from the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive. I heard Peter speak a couple of months ago at the British Aggregates Association committee meeting, which was, it was their annual conference, sorry. And it was up in Buxton, and I really enjoyed it. And I invited Peter to come on the podcast to speak to our listeners around the management standards, which is something as a business we offer the training, the mental health at work training, which covers the management standards. But Peter, you sort of set the ball rolling with these standards. So just for a bit of an introduction to our listeners, Peter, are you able to sort of just explain sort of who you are and sort of the background around the management standards, please?
Yeah. I'm a senior psychologist with the Health and Safety Executive. I'm also a specialist inspector, which means I'm both inquisitive and interested in humans. So I probably got the perfect mix as a job. So I get involved in investigations where the human is the primary area that we want to sort of try and work out what's going on. But from a mental health perspective, I, over the last 24 years, have probably for the first 12 years rowed the boat in the wrong direction, because I was always saying, we've got to do something about mental health. This clearly is an issue. And it was interesting when I came in 1998. We were just coming into the new Labour government was coming in, and they came in and said, "Oh, it's outrageous. You've got 9 million days lost to work-related stress. You need to do something about it." So it actually started from a commitment from the government of the time to tackle it, and it literally started with, "Well, we want you to do a national strategy, and we want it by tomorrow." And we were actually at a conference in Cardiff, myself and Colin and Dave, who were working at the time, other psychologists. And we sat down with a bottle of wine, and we started off with this strategy. And after the second bottle, it got really good. So effectively, we designed this strategy on the back of beer mats. And obviously, by the time we transferred it across, we went into a nice A4 document. But the point it was instant thinking on the go, big issues at the time. We'd just gone through the wave of crystals and crystal healing and everything else, because that was what we were doing in the 90s, weren't we? We were sort of new age and everything else, and people are concentrating very much down the individual, and they weren't addressing the organisational factors. And that's what the management standard is set out to do, was to address organisational factors in work and how they impact on people's sort of mental health, and more actually how they experience work-related stress. Because if we understand mental health, but what we've got is you can experience work-related stress and then not necessarily have mental health. Mm-hmm. You can experience an enduring work-related stress, and that can lead to mental health. So the point being is that the concept of work-related stress are those things in work that cause conflict. Now, if they're managed, then you reduce the conflict. If they're not managed, then they become pressure points. So high demands is one issue. High demands, low control, low support, which we'll cover, which are 3 of the management standards, there's 6 in total. Mm-hmm. If you've got high demands, low control, low support, you've got the perfect sort of environment for which work-related stress will lead to absences. Yeah, and that's what we did, and that was based on, guess what? That was based on sound scientific evidence from it's called the demands control support model. It's by Karasek. If you're interested, listeners are interested, Google it. And it's attached to the management standards with 3 additional areas. One is role, the other is support, etc. So you've got role, you've got change. Here we go. Why have I got role, change, demands, control, support, role, relationship, and change? Yep, there you go. So
No, absolutely. You've just rattled off the six areas, Peter. I appreciate that. Peter, just out of interest, I find that when we go to offer our training to companies and to organisations, and we explain to them that ours follows an organisational approach, so it's very useful as a business from an organisational point of view to help them structure the business to look to reduce areas of stress in their business. We kind of come up against this mental health first aider type concept. What's your thoughts around the mental health first aider and training individuals within an organization to be mental health first aiders? Because I believe there's some challenges around that. I think it can work as part of a larger organizational approach, but there needs to be an organizational approach. You can't just put mental health first aiders into a stressful environment and expect mental health to be fixed in an organization.
No, absolutely. I mean, this would be the first and only geeky bit that I'll give you. But where we're looking at is this concept of primary, tertiary, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So tertiary is at the individual level. Secondary is at the level of management or support, and can be a range of things like teaching you mindfulness and resilience. Could be a tertiary intervention. Primary is where we as the regulator are interested, because guess what, you're duty bound under the health and safety law to do a risk assessment for all health issues, not just it's physical, therefore we won't do stress. That's reg 3 of the management regs. Reg 5 requires you to do something about it. This isn't not a nice to, this is a definitive process we would expect. So we're going to do an investigation. We want to know, have you done a risk assessment? Because you're aware you've got problems. Where you've got them? How many of your listeners do staff surveys? Hello? They all come back and say, I'm happy and healthy. Most of the time, they come back and say, I'm happy and healthy in this area, but not this area. Well, the not this area is the area that you then think, maybe I need to do something. Maybe I need to tackle that. So
perfect.
Yeah. So the tertiary stuff, which is very much based around the individual. So when you're doing mental health first aid, and I've said this to them, I would give my right arm for over 800,000 people informed about mental health. Okay, so that's how many at the moment there are mental health first aiders. And in doing that, their informedness is useful at that tertiary level. It gets people through a difficult area or a patch. The problem I have, and it's not necessarily as a consequence of necessarily mental first aid, is people just go, well, I'll put a mental first aider in, but then they don't have a system afterwards to deal with whatever that means for that person. The other thing is we simply get people to do mental first aid and not realise that actually they need support. Yeah. So they themselves may hear information that's going to cause distress to them. If you don't have the support for your mental health first aiders, then you've got a liability issue. If you don't, and if you solely believe having a mental first aider is going to make me happy, then that's not the case as an inspector, because it's a tertiary intervention. It's at the individual level. We're expecting you to tackle this at organisational level. If you have a job that's the demands are so excessive that you've got 20 people on that particular job, and 10 or 15 of them are saying, I can't do this. You haven't got 10 or 15 people who are weak, who are in difficult situations. You've got 10 or 15 people that are in a system that isn't working.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to say. Change the system. I mean, we're all, as I think at the conference, I did this phone thing. We all carry these mobile phones around. These phones have capability to hold 10,000 files. If you go into an office pre-phones, 10,000 files is the size of a small office which had maybe 20 people in. That's what we're talking about here. So depth of information, depth of stuff that we got is really, really important. What we have seen over the last 30 years is a move away from managing the demands for the people to managing the demands of the systems that we've got. And the systems will do one thing: they always create more demand. So you have to put restrictions in the system. So that's why some companies in the European Union, in particularly like say Deutsche Post and that they switch and Deutsche Bank as well. They switch their emails off at 7 o'clock at night. They're forcing people to actually have quality time. The right to relax is now enshrined in French law. So it's because there's a recognition that we have to limit these technology stuff, and that's the difference. You see, in the 1950s, it was very practical, hand sort of based economy that we had. We made things with our hands.
Yes.
Absolutely. We packed things with our hands. We did all of these things with, and then technology has made it faster and efficient, more technically efficient, but in the process, it hasn't brought people along. But saying that, Aristotle reported what we know is work-related stress. Being a priest during the Reformation, highly stressful, and seeing that canary in dying or falling off its perch down a mine shaft, equally.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think
absolutely. Okay, so just quickly before we go into the 6 management standards, from an inspector point of view, do the HSE currently prosecute companies or fine them based on low levels of stress management within their organisations? Is there any cases that have been brought at all, Peter?
It's highly unlikely that we will take a prosecution. So let's say that goes to court. I think we have put improvement notices into organisations, and we put those in enshrined under the Health and Safety at Work Act is Section 2, which requires you to manage people's health and safety at work and exposure to hazards. So that's always the basis of any notice that you give. But you are then required to do the risk assessment. So where the regulation comes in is that risk assessment bit. So actually, that's where, if the circumstances are right and the information that you could issue an improvement notice, and that improvement notice would require them to do a risk assessment. But on doing the risk assessment, it also requires them to do Reg 5, which is to put in a reasonable system to manage work-related stress, and that could be, ISO 45003, which is a standard, international standard. It could be the Farmer. If your listeners are into Farmer and Stevenson did a review, and it had 6 elements, and one of those was a mental health plan that actually showed what you do when people are at the start of the process of developing mental health issues and when they're off. Because remember, it's a continuum, and what we're trying to do is to reduce the amount of people going off, because it's 17.9 million days lost to work-related stress, and at 828,000 people off 1 week into the pandemic, not pandemic data this, right? There was a problem. Okay, by the way, that's 2.4 million increase in 1 year pre-pandemic.
Wow. It's incredible, isn't it? The statistics are just absolutely huge. Peter, I really, really appreciate that. Can we just sort of have a talk through then the 6 management standards? So they are demands, control, support, relationships, role, and change. And it's something that we sort of talk through as part of any work we do with an organisation. So with regards to demands, what does that sort of look like from a management standards point of view? What does sort of good look like, and what sort of things would you include in that sort of risk assessment when you look at demands themselves?
So demands you to be looking at the way the work's managed and put in place. So if you've got a mechanized system that's functioning, it goes way faster than the capability of the operator at the end or the midpoint, then you've got to look at how you change that. Or if you're in an office and you go in and you get multiple requests and you're consistently getting multiple requests, that will lead into the potential to suffer from workload stress because high demands, because you've got no control. Hello. And very often when you've got high demands and no control, you have this other thing, which is a lack of support. Just do the work.
Yeah, I got you.
And this,
And it's
it's
interesting
the,
how they all interlink, isn't it? When you start
yeah, and
working on them, they do all interlink, don't they?
they're absolutely, you can't sit there in isolation, go and got high demands and haven't got low control, because actually high demands creates low control. The support can be both peer support and supervisory support. You're not support by your supervisor, but support by your colleagues. You can mitigate some of the impact, but if you're not supported by your colleagues or your boss, then you really, you're there. And then that leads you to think, well, God, my relationships are really knackered. I haven't got a good relationship with my boss or with my work colleagues. Or if you have a good relationship with your work colleagues, that mitigates some of those. So the point is, relationships tie into it as well.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor a Half Dozen Things podcast. At Flagship Partners, we take road safety really seriously, and we're your road safety partnership. We help transport companies with compliance and training across their businesses, including first aid, driver CPC, and other transport management services. So if you're FORS accredited or you want to improve your operator compliance risk score, give Flagship Partners a call today.
And then, what's my role? Well, don't quite know. My role is this, but today it's this, and this, and this. And then, do you want to find the biggest potentials? Like, if you get a really poorly managed change program, you get work-related stress. That's the characteristic. So you can't. I know you can't necessarily see them in isolation, but for control, you want to give back control to the operator through the systems that you've got. For support, you need to have official support channels, i.e. line management responsibilities, etc. Keep in touch meetings or anything. But you have to, the informal element of support is really, really important, that people feel actually they're being listened to, that they when they say something. And as they then move on to their role, give them role clarity. The one thing that we do seem to be brilliant at is taking clarity away from what the role is. What's your role? Well, it's this. Okay. And this, and this, and maybe this. Okay. People need clearly defined roles. And if you've got bullying, you've got a bullying culture, and then I say that, you've got people who do routinely, have a go at people. It's not a good culture. That has to be addressed. So relationships, taking it back to its purest form, if bullying is there, you can't, you have to address that, and you cannot say, "Oh, it's okay, it's fine." It's like, no, it's not, because that leads to a lack of control, a feeling unsupported, and it impacts, on a range of other elements of your behaviour. And then you go to the role, and your clarity of the role, as we just discovered, is sort of important. And then you pop everything into change, and you go, here, it's fine. And now, I asked you, I'll give this the illustrator. What did the pandemic do for the 6 areas? Think about this. The pandemic increased demand since wave 2, 3, 4, and 5, and partially the way through wave 1. It took complete and utter control away. Mm-hmm. Okay, it led to a breakdown in support mechanisms between businesses and people who were working at home, who weren't working at home, were working on site, and their management or bosses were working at home. It absolutely knackered relationships. Mm-hmm. Because people didn't have those coffee relationships, they weren't meeting them, and then on top of that, you're never allowed to work from home on Monday afternoon. No, you can't possibly work from home, but on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, you are working from home. Bang, changed overnight. Roles changed overnight. Well, that's okay. We gave people computers, we gave them screens, and then everything's fine here. Reality is that we simply gave them the technology. We didn't actually think about the behavioral stuff, and then we sweep it along. And what have you got? The biggest unprepared change program in 100 years. And we know all of this stuff on the mental health and all of this stuff on stress was predictable, because we were able to track the 1918 Spanish flu panic. What happened after the Spanish flu panic? The Great Depression and an increase in mental ill health. Wow. So that's why we know what was going to happen. Well, what hadn't happened at that time was they were coming together at the same time. So, actually, we had a global pandemic and a global recession coming together. Perfect storm, which is, I think, the presentation I did for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just think it's fascinating how much impact that's had on the way we work organizationally, and actually there's very little recognition, I think, from a lot of businesses around actually they can proactively improve and help support their people by implementing the management standards, by reviewing them, by making it a part of what they do.
By actually saying we're going to look after our people. You know, well-being isn't just about giving someone physical in stuff to do. It's not just exclusively about you know, head massages, whatever else you want to do. It is about physical health, you know, going for cycling, gym membership, but it's also about having conversations with people and designing jobs around people. Okay.
Yeah.
And not people around the jobs.
Absolutely. So
and what we do at the moment is we do the second. We go, oh,
yeah,
you're going to fit this role.
Yeah. We look at
machine.
The needs of the business, and then we see people as resource, don't we? Human resources. We see them as a resource to go and implement a job. What other tools are there sort of in the arsenal from HSE? I'm aware of sort of how there's stress indicator tools and those kinds of things. How do you sort of see organisations sort of pulling these together? Would you suggest that they, you know, because there's, sorry, I'll shut up. You're going to talk then.
You're given the management standards, which is the outline, which is there. You talk about the talking toolkits about how you have conversations with people around work-related stress. You look at your own internal resources around some of the findings from the Farmer and Stevenson review about what you need to have a mental health plan in place, about what you're going to do to promote positive mental health and reduce mental ill health. And I think that's the important definition here. You know, mental illness is a consequence of poorly managed mental health. We're not managing people's mental health. We have the potential for mental ill health to occur. And what is managing mental health? It's the health and well-being initiatives that we do that seek to make workplaces better, that look at, you know, helping people to be better and stronger. So in that context, you can do resilience training, you can do mindfulness training, but if you put them back into a toxic organization, which is, you know, looking at the process, you're going to potentially give them give these skills and then make them acutely aware of how bad their workplace is, which I kind of think is kind of ironic, really, isn't it? So yeah, and so we got these resources that sit within the HSE, and then I know I'll cover it now, but we've got the a new standard by ISO, International Standards Organization, called 45003, and that looks at psychological health and safety in the workplace. I was part of a group that developed that. It was 3 years of life and lots of meetings, including meetings at 12 o'clock at night, because it's a global thing. So you know, obviously I took time off the following day, put in my own health and well-being, and that itself is a management system. Now, health and safety looks to see that you have a management system for health and safety. What you now have in ISO 45003 is a management system for psychological health and safety, which is tied into 45001, which is the management system standard. And then there are multiple amounts of resources out there on the web about how you can tackle work-related stress, how you improve people's mental health. You've just got to decide what's right for you as an organization. But here's the thing. If you assume you know what your people want, but you don't ask your people what they want, then you're in trouble. And this is what happens. This is what the top-down processing. As management, we tell you what to do. As employees or as people further down, they're expected to respond. So that top-down management is where you get most failures, because your employees might not realize why they want to change or why they should be doing it in the first place. There's a lovely model by a guy called Prochaska called the staged change model. And it talks about these two principles of pre-contemplation. Most people in an organization, pre-contemplation, don't know why I need to change. But I do know why I need to change. I don't know why they want to do this. A lot of people in management are at contemplation. We've got to change for this. But that's not communicated with the workforce. So there's a disjoint between the workforce and sometimes the supervisor or management positions. So you've got to bring everyone along on that journey, and that's where I think you get this disconnect, which happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the requirement to consult with the workforce is a requirement of the Health and Safety at Work Act anyway, isn't it?
So it's embedded clearly in the Act.
Yeah, and it's so people and largely speaking, a lot of
and also in the management regs as well.
Yeah, and it doesn't in my experience, often some of the poorer, more challenged workplaces often don't do enough consultation with their workforce. And nonetheless, it's not just about the safety side. It is, like you say, about the management of stress and people's well-being and health as well. So, yeah, fantastic.
You can't see these things in isolation. You've got to think of it as a whole picture. What am I going to do at an organisational level to manage the risks? Or to manage effectively, what you're doing is you're identifying a hazard in the workplace. What do you do to manage that hazard? What is the level of risk from that hazard? That's why you do the risk assessment. Yeah. What then do I do once I know what the problem is? Well, you consult your employees. You ask that you work with them about solutions. Why? Because generally the solutions that they come back with are more cost effective and will work because they have actually bought into the process. Then what do? You implement it. You don't put 20 changes in one go. You put 4, maybe 5, and you review it after 12 months. Okay. You could review it midway. If it's not working midway through, put something else in place. Don't go, it's not working, but we're going to wait 12 months to see if it's not working. If it's definitely not working, then put something else in place. But the point is you do that process of putting them in, and then you monitor and review. Oh my God, what is that? The 5 steps of risk assessment. And where do we do that? In every other working practice. If you're working on a machine, you do the 5 steps of risk assessment. If you're working on a lathe, if you're out on a construction site, wherever you are, you're routinely doing risk assessments. But what we're saying is you've got to think also, how do I do a risk assessment for work-related stress? And that is it. That is basically the same principles of the 5 steps of risk assessment, where you work with your people to generate solutions. Get rid of that top down. It doesn't work. Bottom up with a top down, and where they meet in the middle is good. But bottom up, where there's no consideration of what the requirements are at the top, is also potentially a problem area. So you've got to kind of meet in the middle. You've got to talk to your people. It's good to talk. There you go.
It is good to talk. Peter, yeah. That's fantastic. Is there anything I've missed so far that I've not asked that I probably should have done? What's the pressing question? I feel like we've been quite thorough in what we've covered.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any sort of pressing question. What I would say to you is the narrative of work has changed, and we've got to embrace the situation that we find ourselves in. And if we don't, in 10 years from now, I'll be having a conversation with you. I'll be 65, and I'll be saying the same thing, which is we had a once in generation opportunity. It's now, and if we don't do it, if we don't tackle work-related stress and we don't improve people's experience of mental health at work, we risk huge impacts on a community, on an individual, and on workplace. But more than that, if we don't start tackling what is clearly a mental health crisis that we were coming into, and what we're now seeing because of the pandemic, we ain't going to get out of this. We have 10 years and where we can do something to tackle this. And I want to be involved in that. I don't want to be people going, oh, it's too hard. It's too hard. Can't do anything about it. Well, asbestos was too hard. Welding fumes was too hard. Putting guardings on the machines all of these too hard things had to be addressed. That's where we're at now. Yeah. Stress has to be addressed. It is the seminal issue of its time. 57% of all substance is stress, depression, and anxiety. In a modern UK PLC, that's not something that we should be that we should sit there and accept. We should be challenging that. Okay, because we challenged it on all those other areas, and what have we got? Reduction in asbestos cases, and reduction in other areas where we had high levels of accidents. We've reduced that. Now mental health and its health, and actually their consequences, because obviously your listeners can't see that. If you were stuck at it now and you could see me and there were two computer screens and I start typing here, I'm upright, I'm all really good, but if I get too much pressure and too many things come, I can end up moving forward like I am now, and my hands can be both to the left and the right, and I can be, well, what is that? That's musculoskeletal disorders. Do you see the association? And you see that in any job. If you put pressure on people, they do things that cause their physical body to react and go, oh, and then actually we've got to remember the two sort of combine. Change the narrative. That's what I'm talking about. Take it from the too hard to the must do and will do, because there is a generation of people coming into the work who will expect to be looked after, and there are also kids who are now becoming apprentices who are coming with depression and anxiety because of what happened during the pandemic, and you can't put them into a world of work and go, sorry, no, we're not going to, we're just going to plow ahead and pretend everything's the same. You can't do that anymore. No. We have to change.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. Cheers, I echo absolutely what you say. It's about ensuring the environment is set up correctly to help support people in organisations. So thank you so much for joining me, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it, and I think we smashed through 30 minutes there of fantastic content. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
You could talk for a long time on this, but
got to make it accessible for people, haven't we? We've got to make it accessible.
Yeah. But honestly, I take the passion of one person over the lack of passion from 100 people. So be passionate about this. This is our time. This is the time, and I don't want to be doing this in 10 years. I want somebody else to be saying, we're getting it right. We're starting to get it right. We're getting it right. But it will take 10 years to get it right. But I tell you what, we don't kick off in the next 5 years and get some real major impact, then and then I'll come back to have a chat to you next year and the year after. Keep going. Do it.
I appreciate it, Peter. Thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You take care now. Thank you very much. Bye now.
I really hope you loved today's episode, and if you did, please make sure you subscribe and listen out for future episodes too. Please do share it across your social media channels. We hope to reach more and help more people. If you want to find out more about me, my name's Pete Rushmer. You'll find me across any social media channel, and my business, Flagship Partners, and we're your partners in success across your business. Thank you. See you again soon.